So we've already had a chance to think a little bit about the metaphor that Jesus has used in John chapter 10. And John chapter 10 is a passage which is devoted throughout the whole chapter to the metaphor of Jesus as the shepherd. And we spread it over 3 years because that's the 3-year cycle of reading. So this is year A, and we're just getting the opening round, as it were. And we expect Jesus to say, I'm the good shepherd, but he's going to say that on this Sunday next year. We've stopped at verse 10, so we haven't got quite that far. But where we stop is a most interesting passage, especially when you compare it with the sentence just before it. The thieves, the people whose love and whose best interests are not devoted to the well-being of the sheep, that's us, okay, we're the sheep. Those people only come to steal, to kill, and to destroy, says Jesus. That's the mission statement of the false shepherds, the people who pretend to be shepherds, but for whom the sheep are just things to be stolen, killed, and destroyed. And then Jesus says directly after that, in direct kind of opposition to that, but I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. John 10:10, I've come that they may have life and life in all abundance, as we used to learn as a teenager down at the Church of Christ at the other end of Keene Street. So there's the difference, there's the challenge. Jesus is offering us an abundant life, and that life is available to us now. It's not a post-death insurance package that we might inherit if we're good children at the end of our lives. Jesus has come so that we might experience abundant life. If you like, another way of saying that, Jesus is come so that we can experience everything God intended for us at creation. Okay? Why did God make the world, if we can use such a simplistic phrase for an amazing cosmic process? But why does life exist? Why does the universe exist? It's not a 72-year exam. We only get into heaven if we pass the exam at the end of whatever number of years we've spent working on it. I like to think that what Jesus is saying here is, I've come to do the cosmic reset. Through my faithfulness, through my death, God is going to take us back to where we were at the beginning in the first chapters of Genesis, where life can be lived abundantly, without fear, without guilt. That doesn't mean we don't stuff up. It doesn't mean we don't feel bad about stuffing up. But we don't freak out about stuffing up, because we know our shepherd is the one who's going to put the oil on our nose and fix up the scratches and make things good again. It's called forgiveness and healing and reconciliation. So we have this beautiful parable embedded in the lived experience of the people in the southern part of ancient Palestine, ancient Israel. And it's a parable of abundant life, the way God has always intended life to be. If you like, going back to the original blessing of creation. So let me draw your attention to that other reading we had from the book of Acts. My asthma is not quite out the yard yet. Perhaps the shepherd has a bit more work to do on me. We've got this little snapshot written by Luke. Well, we think it's Luke. We don't know who it was really, but we've always said it was Luke, so let's keep saying that. And Luke has written this story of the early church, and it's the only place you'll find the story being told. And that's why, for example, during Eastertide, we give the Old Testament readings a flick and we focus on the book of Acts for the first reading. Because in the aftermath of Easter, the church, the lectionary committee, wants us to focus on some of these stories from the very early Jesus communities in Jerusalem. And Luke has told a few stories about that, and he's had a great big speech he wrote for Peter to give, and now he's doing a summary of what the impact of all that was. Let me read it to you again, or bits of it again. They devoted themselves, these several thousand people by now, devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to the prayers. Awe came upon everyone because many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day they spent much time together in the temple. They broke bread at home. That's what we do here on Sunday morning. They were doing at home every day, and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of the people. Now the Gospel of John was not written, actually the book of Acts and the Gospel of John were probably both written around the same time, early in the 2nd century, but they were probably not aware of each other as they're writing their texts. But I suggest to you that that picture that Luke paints in that part of Acts chapter 2 is an unpacking of the idea of to have life and to have life in abundance. That's what it looks like. Well, at least that's what it looked like for the very first Jesus people in Jerusalem in the year 30, 31, 32, that sort of period, before they too got driven out of town by the temple authorities. And we know that story of stoning of Stephen and Saul persecuting the church and so on. So here we have a picture of how at one point in time, in one particular place, Jerusalem, what it looked like to have that kind of life that Jesus said he came to give. We're 2,000 years later, we live in a totally different culture, have totally different ways of doing things, which doesn't mean they're right, it's just we have different ways of doing things. And the challenge is the same, even if the answer might be different. And I can't actually tell you the answer, but that's the work of this church community, not the building. That's our work as Jesus people at St Andrews to answer this question. What would our church, apologise for my voice, what would our church look like if we actually took seriously the idea of being a community of people committed to living creation life, the life God offers us in Jesus, and what would it need to be like to have the kind of impact on the people around us in Lismore and the villages nearby, where they would say, we want what she's got. Okay? Those people at St Andrews seem to have something. We thought they were stuffy old Anglicans. They probably still are. But, what are they doing? How come they do all this stuff? And how is it that they have become such an abundant source of living water and a spiritual well for the city of Lismore? That, of course, is the $60,000 question, as they used to say on the TV in my childhood. But that's the big question. How can we, not just individually, but as a community, how do we say yes to that abundant life that Jesus said he came to give us? And the answer is in your hands. Isn't that good? Isn't that lucky for me?